Evening all. I'm glad I left this game to the evening and did a proper engine inspection of this game, and I realise the nature of the game we're about to see, the Shirov versus Yifan Hou game in Tradewise Gibraltar tournament. Very, very sharp, one of the sharpest opening systems known to mankind. I suspect Fischer spent many nights over many years studying the poison pawn variation of the sharp Sicilian defence. The sharpest, most razor edge system going. I think one mistake could be fatal in this type of opening system. So Alexey Shirov playing white played e4, and it's Yifan that played the Sicilian, and we have now an entry into the poison pawn variation of the bishop g5, which the weakness of the last move is weakening that b2, and this is the poison pawn, the b2 pawn. Tradition in the old times, about the 70s, 80s, 90s, even, no, not 90s, but the computers used to munch pawns on the queen side, and then used to be mated if they were playing strong humans. That's how humans used to beat the old engines of the past. The limited horizon moves ahead. What would happen after winning material? Would there be punishment? This variation, extensively analysed, we can only touch the surface of one or two example variations. If you look at the PGN, I've just experimentally put a few variations, which just for interest really. To gain tactical empathy, you really need intense engine analysis for this game. Okay, so e6, f4, and now queen b6. And you might wonder why would someone in their right mind, against Alexey Shirov, who went to the Botvinnik School of Chess, one of the sharpest, most dangerous, tactically aggressive, fire on board grandmasters on planet Earth, over 2700 for many years, why on earth would you want to play queen b6 against Shirov, or even this whole variation? Why not play something like the French defence or the Caracan? Not only playing the Sicilian defence, it's like a Lascarian psychology going on to play into Alexey Shirov's strengths, maybe to make him overconfident, overcomfortable, a bit complacent. I have no idea what was going on in Yifan Hou's mind. Of course, we try and gain some empathy for the psychology of the game, the tactics of the game, the positional plans, but I would say, this is putting oneself on a complete knife edge. In terms of the technical merits of entering the poison pawn variation, is there any alternative to queen b6? Maybe h6? I think some of you on YouTube videos have mentioned this pawn sack you can do to get control of the e5 square. There's an interesting historical pawn sack, and it might be here, or might be a little bit later. I think g5 takes... This might be a variation. I'm not sure if it's this position exactly, but there's some other ideas. Maybe h6 is a playable move. Maybe g5 is not needed. Maybe there's other moves here. Knight bd7, but queen b6 enters the maze of theory, which has evolved over many years. Queen b6, going for that weakness of the last move, preventing white from naturally playing queen d2 and casting queenside, looking forward to a pleasant maybe attack on the king side. So queen b6 interrupts some of white's natural plans, weakens some diagonals, weakens some squares like c3 if that pawn's removed. Also, this diagonal is already weakened with f4. If white's forced to castle king side, then this diagonal is weaker than usual rather than the king on the queen side. So anyway, queen d2, queen takes b2. In the classic Fischer-Spassky match of 1972, although Fischer might have heavily analysed this variation, even he got in trouble with his queen getting trapped. I think it was a retreat here, knight b3 Spassky played, which eventually, after rook b1 rather, not leaving the rook, but rook b1, and there was a retreat of the knight and the queen got trapped. The rook is unpraised. So rook b1, not too many alternatives there, so the queen goes to a3. Okay, so in terms of development, it looks ludicrous that white has developed basically 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. Black's munched a pawn which seems irrelevant, in fact gives white b-file pressure So the question is, who in their right mind plays this with either side? Or maybe the attacking player might like white here, but who would play it as black? Someone has to be as cool as a cucumber to play this. I think Yifan Hou's proved that already in one of her earlier games in Gibraltar with an I am Adam Hunt. I don't want to say that too quickly. So Adam Hunt, whose sister Harriet Hunt is also a British ladies champion. Anyway, so Adam Hunt's an IM, and he had a seemingly dangerous attack, and Yifan proved to be very, very cool under pressure in the Sicilian defence as black, and that's one of her trademarks for this tournament actually, which she got 8 points to share first with Nigel Short, but lost on playoff. But this is one of the critical games here. So in this position, Alexey Shirov carried on, no doubt played hundreds of times before, E5. So E5 does quite a few things potentially. It drives through the D file, maybe to D8, gets rid of this defensive knight, maybe makes way for knight E4 if black's not careful in some lines, which could be dangerous in its own right. Also pills open F file pressure. There's a lot of functionality behind this early break in the centre E5, and there's tons and tons of theory on this position. Okay, and I've given some example variations, but they're pointless. There's millions of variations to look at here. We're going to look at the game continuation. So H6 was played, and now the bishop was just retreated to H4. Now the challenge was accepted to open up some more lines. So D takes E5, which if we look at it, okay, extends the scope of the bishop. So we've got some opportunities for the bishop. We've got some opportunities for the queen to also come back to certain key squares. Maybe a useful check once white castles kingside, or a check like this. So there's opportunities which is created for black, but obviously for white as well, vacating the E4 square for a knight E4 if the opportunity arises. Opening up coordination on D8. Okay, tons of theory here. F takes E. And now, interestingly, a move which seems to provoke a rupture in the centre, knight D5, which seems to invite white to be able to take on D5 as the game continuation and play a seemingly lucrative E6, which seems quite logical from a number of points of view, that this diagonal is already being weakened by H6, weakening some light squares. So if we get this natural looking bishop E2, it will be threatening bishop H5. Surely that will be unbearable for the black king to be stranded in the centre, if that's really on the cards and difficult to parry. But black hasn't got too many choices in this position, apart from taking the pawn. I think it's going to be disaster if anything else. Bishop takes E6 was played. Let's try and gain some tactical empathy for the black position here. If queen takes A2, I think this is going to be busted somehow. E takes F7, king takes, rook D1, and it looks as though the king's out in the snow here. Okay, say knight C6, bishop E2, and when white castles, it's going to be with check. Do you really want your king on F7? Not particularly, but let's follow this through. Knight takes D4. Let's insert a check. Knight F5, following this engine line. Okay, in this position, let's follow this. Rook A1, dislodge the queen from there. Queen takes D5. That was the point, to win that D5 pawn, dislodging the queen from protecting D5. The king is not having a great time here off the bishop D3. I think this is about to collapse, explode, this position for black. Or maybe there's some resilience. Sometimes there is resilience, but rook takes F5 is starting to look a bit menacing. Maybe a small advantage here, but this is engine best play as black. So, okay. But even in this position, it's starting to build up now with rook B6. But at least black got the queens off there, so that's a good thing. But still, okay, it's starting to be a bigger advantage, bigger and bigger for white the more it's looked at this position. Okay. But so there's some dangers anyway. So after e6. Okay, so queen takes a2, I don't know, might be an alternative if you're an engine, but it looks greedy, it looks really, really dangerous, not really doing anything for king safety. So let's look at the logic of this move, bishop takes e6. Okay, what does it do? Well, when the knight moves, then the rook's got activity for defense. It does protect d5. What else? The main thing is the king doesn't seem that harmed at the moment after bishop takes e6. It does leave b7 to be taken, so inviting rook takes b7. I don't think that's particularly good here. Knight takes e6 was played, but let's have a look at rook takes b7. So what would be the point here? Rook takes b7, sort of reverse poison pawn. If that was a poison pawn, b2 is black saying that the b7 is also a bit poisoned. Knight d7, or maybe bishop c5. Bishop c5 a bit stronger. Possibly black survives here. You never know. Queen f4 looks a bit dangerous. Rook takes b8 is a threat. So something has to be done about that. Or does it? Rook f8. Rook takes b8. This is an interesting, very sharp line. Rook takes, queen takes. Okay, rook sack, but the king is in the centre, so maybe it was a reverse poison pawn to take that. Is it going to be something strange going on here? Perpetual check time or something? Whoops, king e2. And king g8. And actually, even though, okay, black might be a bishop down, but this looks better for black now from a practical point of view. In fact, black is apparently theoretically slightly better here. So that could turn out to be a poison pawn. This rook takes b7 apparently. So let's have a quick look at that again. So bishop c5 will promote that. So in the PGN you'll see that at the promoted line. So the idea of sacking the knight here to wriggle the king over there and leave the white king in the centre is a rebound in this variation. I'll take black here. Okay, so knight takes e6 though was played instead of rook takes b7 in this position. So the weakness of the last move, it wasn't defending b7 anymore, so rook takes b7 was a serious idea maybe to consider. Anything else there? Okay, let's not go too deep into that variation. So knight takes e6, let's go forward one move. It does rupture this diagonal now, this knight takes e6. So f takes e6, and now getting onto that diagonal seems logical with bishop e2 to stop black naturally castling. Black hasn't really got time to play something like g6, I expect. I think that will get absolutely smashed. It would be ludicrous to think that g6 is possible actually, because I think even just castling will cut the king from castling. Just castling, big advantage to white. It's not good. So, okay. Black chooses now bishop e7, which has got some benefits to it. Secures the d8 square for the king's flight to d8 if needed. So onto this check. And that's what happens next. So that's the main idea. Bishop c5, from an engine point of view, from very brief analysis, seems as though it might be survivable if you're a computer as black. So c4, which looks as though it's 1-0 with numerous threats like rook b7, cd, looks absolutely crushing. Computer idea coming up, a5, as though the idea is bishop b4, but in fact after c takes d5, forget bishop b4, that just loses here. Let's just show you that. Check, check, rook takes, exchange sack, and this would be advantage to white by a little bit or a big bit. Let's put the number to that. Well, not much, but that will still be an advantage to white, that position, okay, in theory. But actually, in this position, there's a ludicrous idea after c takes d of playing queen a4, which works actually with bishop c5, because if you think bishop c5 logically stops white castling, queen a4 has got the logic of playing not only queen takes h4 check, but queen e4 with that unprotected rook, and it gets very, very hairy here. and in fact it seems from an engine point of view this is still going to be okay. D takes king c8 and it's changed its mind. Maybe a queen e4 check here is okay for black. So this position, bishop f3 say, which coordinates on b7. Check. Queen sack time, queen b4. So maybe, you know, an engine can survive some of these positions with black, but it's hair raising. It's totally hair raising and amazing. You know, I don't know the resources you need. So she played actually a move which seems more sensible, and in fact the storm of the position, the fire on the board towards black's king. Shirov is known for fire on board. His book of annotated games, Fire on Board. I've got it actually. Very exciting, dynamic games. The fire on the board doesn't last that long, thankfully for black. So king d8, we get an exchange of bishops, maybe to some of black's relief. So could white have played something like c4, try and rip the black king? Well, the bishop's hanging here on h4, so white has to do something. What alternatives were there to bishop takes e7? Bishop f2? Does that allow black to wriggle out somehow? Engine suggestions, okay, don't really want to move this bishop again, but if that's what the engine is indicating. And now check, there's some logic to it, I guess, because rook f8. So again, it's backfired if white can't get that rook out for the attack. Is that a poison pawn now? Possibly. Possibly queen c6 looks like the safest. Try and get queens off, and black should be able to survive that if white really is obliged to take the queens off. If anything else, then knight d7 maybe. Alright, so we've got a ludicrously complex game here. So in the game, bishop takes e7 was played. Forget strategic crush. That concept's out of the window in this game. This game is about playing the position, making sure you don't get mated, trying to get the initiative, try and see every opportunity for any poison pawn to see if you can restore equality. So queen takes e7, offering, not offering rather the b7 pawn anymore. Castles. So white has the rooks connected. Hello, hello. And blasting down the files. Nice. And coordination. Nice. Looks pretty dangerous. What has black got? Long-term asset. Long-term. If, big if, black can survive the middle game. Maybe in the end game the pawns will be nice to look forward to. But unfortunately, before the end game, the middle game, the gods gave. So, of chess. So knight d7, and now this still looks scary. Okay, offering b7. Now also now after rook takes b7, there's a menacing threat of queen a5 check, just mating black, because also this e8 is clearly covered, and if king moves queen c7, so that something has to be done about that. So a seemingly paradoxical, well, not paradoxical move, a safety move, prophylaxis against queen a5, I guess you can call it. Queen c5 check. Seems to be very engine approved, this move. Giving time now for black without getting mated to queen a5 check. Okay, to play now rook b8. So black doesn't mind this position as much now, especially after rooks come off. It doesn't seem as terrifying as before. So black has cheekily taken Shirov on in the most dangerous, one of the most dangerous Sicilians going, and has a position where it's starting to look as though it's not that bad, and maybe Shirov's next move is a total relief to black. In this position, only 3 pieces left for white to deal with, and I think Alexey must have blundered here. Queen e2, or is it? It's one of the strongest moves. Maybe bishop g4, but queen e2, in light of the game, doesn't seem that convincing. Bishop g4, rook e8, and is black starting to unravel? Say in this example, knight c6, and where's the attack now? Queen f4, threatening mate. Okay, rook e7. Bishop takes e6, violence to get queen c7 in. Takes, and now look. There's a back row issue of bishop d5. And in this position, let's say d4, where is white's advantage in this endgame? Fire's gone in the position. So Alexey's move, even though it looks strange from the light of the game, in this position, so knight takes b8. He actually played queen e2, which is actually the engine's third choice. Queen e1 was another choice, but queen e2 seems to invite seemingly strong and simple move, queen b5. Totally engine improved move to try and tie the white queen down, obviously to f1. If queen e6, queen takes f1 check. But now there's two moves engines like better than just taking the queens, which does release the tension clearly. Queen e1 or queen d1. So say queen e1, but how is black just plays knight d7? And this is okay. Queen b2. Did Alexey Shirov not like this position? Bishop takes e6, a6, king e7. Yeah, where's the attack? It seems black's unravelling. It's going to play rook f8. It's not going to be that hot, and it seems to be evaluated about dead equal now. So maybe, you know, this is already starting to look as though the worst is over after queen b5. So Alexey took the queens off. Hooray! Survived! Survived the poison pawn to get this position. Where actually the distant dream might be coming true now, that these centre pawns are going to be significant. But there is still the small matter, not so small matter, of rook f7 maybe, to try and get another pawn. Knight c6 and the pawn's taken, so we're equal on pawns. So it's just these centre pawns and this knight versus the bishop. And here black starts to display an excellent technique, improving the pieces. Rook f8 seems very logical. Grab that file. And now knight b4, forking two pawns. Why not? Rook b7, going to win that b5 anyway, in punishment for that fork. So what does black have here now? So after all that scary stuff, black has two connected pass pawns in the centre, ready to run now. Just needs to get backing of rook, king and knight. And these two pawns won't be as effective. Outside pass pawn here versus the centre pawns. It very soon starts to look as though the centre pawns are much better for black than white's outside a pawn and 2-1 on the king side. Because the a pawn can be immediately put under fire here. Pardon the pun, knight e3. Now, attacking the rook, check, protecting the pawn. Now the pawns start to run. e5, and this is the sign. Actually, now it's white's turn to be on the defensive. So rook h7, knight b2, forking bishop and pawn, but giving up h6. So we have a simplified position now after knight takes a4. It's really these two pawns versus these two, bishop versus knight. Bishop's kept on for a bit longer. It's not taken, so h4. And it starts to be easier for black to play now. All of a sudden, after knight c3, look at this. Rook on the 7th. King coming in. Looks very, very pleasant for black to march these pawns now. Check. And she doesn't fear playing on and on against you. I'm not going to accept a draw after all that. Surviving all of that terror. So knight d1, strongly centralising the knight now on e3 with check. Getting the king in to herd the pawns in the centre. Check. Now after e3, okay, the bishop is also defensive here against king d3 for that bishop a6. But this is now looking very, very dangerous. These pawns are quite a distance away, and the rook's blocking one of them as well. And this rook and knight and king and pawn can provide certain mating nets around the white king now. After h5 e3, we start to see some possibilities like knight f4 to d3, followed by rook d2 would be mate, because knight would be clamping down on these two escape squares. So bishop a6, but that plan is still effective to get the knight to d3. This pawn is providing, you know, essential mating net implications. So knight d3, stopping any rook b4 just in time as well, threatening rook d2 mate. Not much choice here for white other than bishop takes d3. Also e2 of course and e1 is on the cards. So bishop takes, knight, king takes, and we're left. Black's revelling in the sunlight all of a sudden after such a dramatic game, to have two very dangerous centre pawns against these two pawns which are not really any match for them. Check, and all black needs to do is get the pawns together, ready to go now, and stop white's h pawn. And here Alexey was forced to resign. Let's see, let's just follow this up. He was forced to resign here because d3 looks to be absolutely crushing. So say rook b4, that would just lose that pawn. So say he defended this pawn, let's give an inferior move, then d3 is just all over, or rook, because of these pawns. There's no checks to save white, so let's just follow the best move for a sec in this position. Let's go back to that. Instead of d3, okay, let's follow d3, let's follow the checks, how they'd run out. King f4, check, king g5 or king g3. So this rook h1 is threatening to mate here. Check, e2, and once the pawn gets to d2, that's going to be all over. So say, well, it's all over here. If rook e7, then d2, just queening. So a hopeless endgame for white after a very dramatic opening and middle game. Let's go in overview and summary of this very, very sharp game. It does take absolute guts to play this against a very strong, tactically minded grandmaster like Shirov, known for fire on board. But somehow navigation for a position where the king wasn't getting blasted to bits. Some very interesting moves. Bishop e7, and then this king to d8, offering b7 for a bit of respite to get back into the position. A very important check to guard a5, exchanging with some relief one pair of rooks at least. I mean, there's lots of other options for white to consider, clearly. In fact, one has just emerged here in my mind anyway, just rook. What was wrong with rook fb1 to support the rook? I mean, there's many questions about this game, how the attack could have been improved or whatever, but say takes rook f8, it doesn't seem that bad for black again. So let's go back. So in the game, Alexey just accepted the exchange of rooks there, and more strangely accepted the exchange of queens here rather than queen e1 or queen f2. It seems, look at the PGN in the description and put it through your own play-through facility. I hope you've all got a play-through game facility and you can look at the PGN. Usually you just copy and paste the PGN from the clipboard when you do a new game on modern game viewers, and it will show you. But there's lots of possibilities to explore in this game, and white just relieved the tension with the queen exchange. It seems the others are not that deadly. There's only 3 pieces left though for white to attack with. So black giving up that b7 pawn, reverse poison pawn defense, giving up b7, seemed to give black a tenable position to be able to survive, it seems, from the evidence of the game, to a favourable endgame where those theoretical centre pawns are really coming into their own to be better, more dangerous than white's pass pawns. So the rook, knight and king coordinating very nicely, shepherding the pawns until white's position cannot sustain the pressure here of these 2 pass pawns in the centre. So really a remarkable game. Guts, absolute guts from the current women's world champion. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.